Welcome to episode 10 of the XrmToolCast with your hosts, Jonas Rapp and me, Daryl Labar. In this episode, we sit down with Wael Hamze. Wael is the creator of pretty much every continuous integration framework for CRM that's existed. So we are going to talk a lot in this episode about Azure Devops, talk about Xaml versus PowerShell versus even Yaml, and yes, if you can believe it, we are going to talk about managed versus unmanaged solutions. Wael also goes through and talks about what's required for having 100% automation of your application lifecycle. So, let's go ahead and get started.
Welcome to episode 10 of the XrmToolCast with your host, me, Daryl, always raising Labar, and Jonas, the man, Rapp.
Hi there.
You're not the man, the myth, the legend. You're just the man.
Yeah. I'm still working way up there.
Yeah, well, we had that reserved for that special spot reserved in our hearts for Tanguy.
Yeah, of course.
So today we are going to be diving into some DevOps tools with the expert when it comes to that in the Dynamics CDS world. Wael, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, Jonas and Daryl. Thanks for inviting me to the Toolcast. My name is Wael Hamze. And I've been working with the Dynamics platform since version, I would say 1.2 back in 2004. I think since the platform was introduced, there's been some challenges in adopting proper ALM best practices and DevOps. So since the last 6 to 8 years, I've been trying to put together some open source tools that try and address some of these challenges and make it easy for teams and developers to adopt DevOps and best practices.
Wow. Yeah, I know. I mean, I of course heard of you quite early in my career in Dynamics and found your tools and the things you wrote around it, and it really encouraged me to see that this is possible, even though we have this strange platform from an ALM perspective. So I'm quite curious. Where did it start? How did you were you at a customer, or did you have to sort of straighten your processes out, or was it just maybe people will like this, I'll try to develop some? How did you kick it off?
Good question. It started probably about, about 8 years ago. At some point in my career, I did just pure .NET development, and I've seen some of the best practices being applied there, and how quickly and how easy it is to kind of have a proper process in place, and how helpful that was for the teams. So I started kind of learning about that topic in terms of the build automation. So I've looked at lots of materials online, read several books, and I was thinking why don't we apply the same process to the Dynamics platform? So I joined actually one company where I was supposed to implement the pipelines, but as you know, if you look at this 6 to 8 years ago, I think not a lot of companies and teams had interest in DevOps. So that kind of thing got pushed on the side to and prioritized, for kind of standard deliveries. However, I kind of saw that the potential and the value that this can bring. So I started to kind of in my own time create an open source project, and initially it was on Codeplex. So I called it the XRM CI framework because the XRM term was very kind of popular at the time.
That's what we called it if you were cool by then.
Yeah, exactly. So initially, the first version was kind of tailored towards TFS on premise. There wasn't an online version at that point. And the build process was slightly complicated. So you used to have to edit Xaml workflows to do that. So I used to have a template where you can kind of pass a number of parameters. But sooner or later, I kind of realized that this is going to be a bit hard to extend. So I started to introduce the PowerShell version. So the PowerShell version basically is a list of commandlets that you can then combine into your scripts. So an example of a commandlet is like exporting a solution or importing a solution. So you can invoke these within PowerShell, and then you can combine them to create scripts. And then once you have the scripts, you can get them used by the developer. You can use them in TFS, or you can use them in any other build automation or deployment automation system.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, the whole what do you call it, anatomy of these build tools, the build tasks. That's quite, it takes some effort to learn and understand how it works, really. But I guess basically most of it from your tools are PowerShell in the background, and then you have sort of the user interface that you can see from the Azure Devops side. Is that correctly interpreted?
Yes. So I think the core kind of engine is the PowerShell module, and that's built on top of the Dynamics APIs. Whatever you do manually today, whether it's for build or deployments, there is a chance, 99%, there is an API for it. So there is no reason why you can't actually automate what you do manually. So you're right. The PowerShell module is basically the core of the framework, and then I realized that sometimes to get started, especially within like the type of skills that we have on Dynamics projects, and also going back to the time when kind of this was initially introduced, not many people kind of were keen to go down that PowerShell kind of route. So I was thinking of an easier way to make it more available and more accessible to people. So I created the build tasks about 2.5 years ago, and the reason behind this was to kind of provide first-class integration into Azure Devops. So the idea behind that is, if you're a developer or if you're a customizer that don't write code, if you just want to export and import solutions, or you want to pack solutions from source, then you should be able to easily create your build and release definition just by dragging and dropping, these tasks quite easily, just basically configuring. So yeah.
So there's been like 3 iterations of this then? You had your Xaml version, your PowerShell version, and now the build task versions that are for Azure DevOps in the cloud?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And DevOps kind of keeps evolving. So so I think the next thing is probably kind of using these from YAML, which fortunately doesn't require much changes because the platform already supports it. But I think things keep moving, and I think the framework has evolved with the product and with the DevOps tools as well.
Yeah, I've seen that when I started a new sort of build definition in Azure DevOps now, that the default is that it suggests I should start writing my YAML, but I don't really feel confident with that. So I want my templates. I want my click, point and drag things instead of doing the YAML. Which way do you do it? Have you converted to just writing your own YAML for your definitions?
I haven't yet. However, I know there is some very kind of powerful features that are coming with the YAML that may not be kind of exactly the same as with the designer. So I haven't, and you're right. I think it's something that is new, and if somebody's used to kind of using the designer, then they may be slightly kind of put off to kind of go into the YAML.
Yeah.
However, if you have noticed, there is actually an IntelliSense for the YAML. So you could create a task, and on the right hand side of the screen, it will ask you to input all the parameters, and it will show you all the parameters. And then when you click insert, it will kind of put the YAML. Generate the YAML for you, basically.
Okay. So it's sort of a in between, in the middle path forward. You can still get your help, but it will produce YAML.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I should actually try that once.
Yeah. It's very good actually. Yeah. So I'm probably at some point I will convert some of the builds and releases that I have into YAML and see whether that kind of gives me everything I need, or whether I still need to do some things in the kind of classic designer.
Yeah. Yeah, I know when you released your tools for the first time, I found it and was really inspired, and I figured we had another way at, what was that, Synteros or Innofactor by then, a slightly other approach to it, but it inspired me to create my own tools there. But I discovered I rarely used any PowerShell, or maybe it was just the sort of the glue between the actual C# code that I developed to do the actual work. But so do you have any C# code doing stuff as well, or is it strictly PowerShell?
I think it comes down to preference, I guess, and how you decide to implement things.
And what you know. I knew
and
C#, I didn't know PowerShell.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you look in the SDK, it provides you for example, the package deployer, which is like a project where you're able to import your solutions, import your data, and execute C# code. And if you can execute C# code as part of that, you can pretty much write anything in there. So the only task that you would need for deployment, if you go down that route, is to execute that package in your deployment. So I think some people will decide to go down that route. There are some tasks in the toolkit that you can use. For example, one of them is like managing service endpoints. So there are some out-of-the-box tasks that if you don't have that C# library and you just want to do something, you can quickly use these tasks and get up and running. So it just gives you another option to do that. If you look at builds as well, I mean, the package deployer is mainly for deployment, so you wouldn't use necessarily the package deployer to kind of manage your builds. So you would have to write something like a console app or something to do that. So for these kind of situations, I prefer to have PowerShell scripts. So most of the builds that I use are based on PowerShell. Okay. Because there is a limited number of things, I guess, that you would need to do in a build. However, in deployments, there is so many different iterations and different scenarios that sometimes you have to go down that C# code if you want to have like 100% automation.
Yeah. Let's step back a little bit when you say build, because sometimes developers are thinking build as far as I'm in Visual Studio and I click build, but that's not what you're talking about here. You're talking about an Azure dev build, right? DevOps build. Yes,
that's a really good point. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. In Visual Studio, you click build and it compiles your plugins. I think I'm referring to the Azure DevOps build, or if you're using Jenkins, it could be like a Jenkins build, or but basically, if I was to summarize what a build is, it's basically a process that runs, and the end goal of that process is to generate a package for deployment. And then the other things that the build does is running some checks like unit tests, code scanning. So just to give you an idea, is this package okay to take forward or is it not? So the build is basically generating your packages, and these are the packages that if you didn't have any automations, the developer will have to do, and then they will have to kind of send a zip file to another team to import it. Yeah.
So if you're let's say that you have someone that's in a small shop, maybe they're a consulting firm, maybe they're just they're in a one or two dev shop for an actual customer, an actual and using client. Where would they get started with going? Maybe they know how to push build on Visual Studio, but they haven't done any Azure DevOps sort of training and stuff. Where's the best place to get started and get that first level of knowledge of this is how I set up a build, this is how I integrate it and get it deployed, and this is how I set everything up so I have a smooth automated pipeline?
There is a number of there is a GitHub site actually that shows how to create a build, and so that's been, I think, published by Mark. It's on the GitHub. There is a few videos in there to show you how to create a build and release.
Mark who?
I'll send you. I'll put a link maybe in the podcast. Yeah.
Podcast. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you obviously need some knowledge on Azure DevOps. So in terms of Azure DevOps, there's lots of documentation online, lots of videos. It's quite easy to kind of spend a couple of hours and get familiar with what build and release is. And then if you want to apply the dynamics to that, then that there is that GitHub site that I mentioned. But also in terms of the tasks, they're very intuitive. So they give you like the description on what the parameters are. So it's you should be able to just kind of quickly drag and drop depending on what process you want to put together.
Yeah. And I want to say, I mean, when you're new to the DevOps and the build and release pipelines, I think still, if you start with a template, like a classic Visual Studio desktop build or something like that, then you get a good view of how it's set up. You start with some initializations and you compile and you run the tests and so on. So I think you get quite a far with just that. And then from another perspective, I really like how they have the different levels of the DevOps pipelines that you build first, and the build is separated from the release, and the artifacts that you pass between the build and the release pipelines to make sure that, okay, this is the actual deliverable, and then packaging it in the release pipeline to create a deployment package. So I think it makes sense. It's what we usually do manually, but now it's automated here instead.
Yes, definitely. I think you just mentioned a very good point. Yeah. So Azure DevOps is gives you that separation between build and release, and allows you to add things into the release that make you a bit more organized. So you can add approvals for the different environments. You can add different checks at different stages. You can define all your environments. You can see what you've deployed to what environments. So once you have the process set up, you get a lot of metrics and visibility that allow you to make informed decisions going forward, and you can see where you can improve and where you have problems.
Yeah, and it inherently gives you some quality checks as well, because a build should not be dependent on some things installed on some developer's computer, because the builds are always run on a server somewhere, and they are. If you have Azure hosted builds, then it's a clean image of the server running the build for every build you actually start. So that's a good sort of sanity check that you're not depending on some arbitrary third-party things that's just available on some developer's laptop.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've worked in projects where we had some manual processes, and developers used to have to deploy the plugins into the dev environment before they export, and then their Visual Studio was on a certain version. They didn't put the right configuration, and then or they didn't get the latest, and then they deploy something out of date, and you end up with problems down the line. So yeah, I mean, Azure DevOps and the build, it just gives you a consistent process that if you run this is what you're going to expect, and it works the same every time.
Yeah.
No, a big fear that a lot of especially smaller customers have, or smaller implementers of CRM have, is the amount of time it will take to set that up. Do you have a good estimate, or do you have a ballpark estimate of someone that is brand new to it, and maybe they're trying to figure out if they can accomplish this in a sprint? Like, is this something that they can do in a couple of days to get something up and running, or does it take longer than that to kind of figure out how to put it together and how to tackle it?
I think it depends on how complex the environment and the project is. Sometimes, in conferences, I create a simple pipeline in less than 15 minutes. So just a pipeline that exports the solution or packs the solution from source and then imports that into another environment. So you can get up and running quite quickly. Obviously, if you have lots of different teams, you have lots of environments, and maybe the team don't know Azure DevOps at all, and it may take some time to learn it. But I think with the tools that we have today, and the way kind of Azure DevOps and other kind of automation tools are capabilities that they are providing, I think, it's something that's definitely can be achieved within a short period of time. So we shouldn't kind of avoid it, because even for small teams, I see like if you have a small team, you want to get the small team to focus on delivering the business requirements and the business value. You don't want them to spend time doing these repetitive tasks. So it kind of even makes more sense for small teams to do that they can focus on getting the best out of the team.
Yeah, and I also want to add that there's actually, I think, at least zero investment cost in this, because Azure DevOps is free if you're a small team, and all these build pipelines and so on, they are free unless you want to really push it to the sort of performance limits. So I mean, everything is free. There's no backside to it to get started or to try it out.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So I got some numbers for you. I checked the marketplace, which is of course where you find your tools, and we'll of course put some links in the show notes here. But you've currently got 4,399 installs of your tools, and probably when this episode is released, way over 4,400. And there's 35 different tasks in your package. Which means, I mean, there's everything from export solution, pack things up, reset an instance. There's a whole lot of things in there. I think that's really impressive. That's been constantly growing as well in the volume there. And that's from the consumer perspective. From the developer perspective, you have about 20 contributors to your repository. Almost 70 pull requests that have been accepted, and about 100 forks from different developers around the world. That's quite impressive, I'd say. I wish I had those numbers for anything I did.
Yeah, I was a bit overwhelmed with the kind of interest from the community in this. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the number of downloads from the marketplace are quite high, especially considering that you install this once for your organization. So once you install it in your project or organization, that's it. You don't need to install it again.
Yeah, and it's automatically updated when you release an update. So there's there's literally just one install per client or per organization.
Yeah. I think the interest from the community and the engagement is amazing. I have lots of people from the community raising issues on the GitHub project, saying, I mean, sometimes you get questions or I don't know how to do this, but you also get suggestions on how things can be improved and what are the challenges that they're facing in their projects. And sometimes it gives you a different perspective on things, because there is a limited number of scenarios that you can face working on your own on projects. So having access to all of these kind of teams allows you to kind of gain a wider perspective on how people are using the platform, what are the challenges they are facing, and how we can kind of build something that would address these challenges, but also have a kind of like a common standard or process that kind of shows people how to do it in the right way as well.
Yeah, so you see from the community how they use and abuse the platform, and I guess a lot of issues are also sort of you're doing it wrong, so you have to. But then it's great to get the feedback and to be able to help at least. So I'm not going to take this into a managed or unmanaged discussion, but I'm curious about how you are usually using this. I mean, when you see you have a proper solid DevOps pipeline set up, do you see any difference there? Or is it just the same if it's managed or unmanaged to production? What's your experience there?
I can tell you for the last 4 years or maybe even more, I've been using managed solutions on all my projects apart from the dev environments. So all my pipelines kind of build the managed solutions and then they deploy it. I think the platform is definitely evolving and making it more easy to use managed solutions. I know there's been some issues kind of in the past, but the platform has evolved, so you can see all your layers now. You have patches, you have solution segmentation, So you've got all these capabilities that allow you to kind of use managed solutions properly. The only thing that you have to watch for is if you have a managed environment and somebody makes a change in that environment without using your kind of standard pipeline, like making a change, like which creates an unmanaged layer, and that kind of takes priority. So typically you would have to raise a case to get the engineer to delete that layer to fix that problem.
So do you see that, I mean, using these tools and setting up your pipeline properly, will it help you in the cases, I mean, the cases we hear from the community where there are issues with using managed solutions and so on, would this sort of facilitate making sure you're not breaking the process?
I think it helps in, it doesn't obviously stop people going into the environments. Obviously, if you can lock them down to a certain level. For example, in a lot of projects that I work in, developers don't have access to anything beyond the dev environments. They have other roles in the test environments that allow them to see or test and troubleshoot issues. So you can put that kind of process in place. And sometimes people tend to make fixes in test environments or other environments because just to get it fixed quickly. I think if you have an automated pipeline in place, all you have to do is just make the change in dev and then press a button and then that should take it all the way to the other environments. So it kind of encourages you,
Absolutely, and that's really one of the huge benefits of this, that you don't have to go through all the manual labor of pushing something to test or production, but you can rather just click a button or simply wait for the commit to be propagated.
You mentioned about unit testing, or about testing. Testing can mean lots of things to different people. So what is the testing that you are talking about when it comes to testing your build? Is that deploying to an environment? Is that running end user tests? Is that using like Selenium? Is that using just C#? What exactly is when you say testing? What do you mean by that?
I think there's the way I would like to kind of look at this is there's different tests that happen at different stages in the pipeline. So if we look at the build or at the kind of or the developer side, so the build will normally you want your builds to finish quickly to give you as fast feedback as possible. So you normally run your unit tests as part of the build, and as you may already know, there is a number of frameworks out there for unit testing, dynamics. So that's the kind of first gate. Once you have a build and once all your unit tests pass, then you end up deploying that package into a test environment. And then once you deploy that package, then you want to run another set of tests because your unit tests are only checking whether your code is actually, the logic is making sense, but they're not checking whether you actually deployed it correctly or whether you registered it under the right event. So you tend to run some other integration tests, basically targeting the CRM APIs to invoke your plugins or workflows or any other logic that you may have. And these tend to run a bit slower because they're interacting with the CRM APIs, but they're not the slowest type of tests. So these are the kind of next stage. And typically you would have, after that, you would have some UI tests. So if you're using UI tests, if there is an easy repro framework, which is based on Selenium, which allows you to easily create UI tests for the platform. So if you haven't used it, I would strongly encourage you to have a look at that. I think for UI tests, I think these should be smaller than the unit and the integration tests because they take longer to run. And these kind of tests are mainly kind of going through the user journeys. You can do your smoke tests using these tests, or you can kind of execute your main user journeys using these. And then after that, if your project is really complex, you may consider performance or load testing, which could be automated as well. And then once you're done with all the automated tests, you should have a fairly reasonable level of confidence whether the latest build is working or not. And then you can focus on doing a small number of manual tests if needed to kind of look at the scenarios that are not covered by the automated tests. So the idea is to automate as much as your test as possible, and then look at the exceptions for manual testing or some things that can't be done using automated tests, especially if you're using the online version. You get updates from the vendor on weekly basis almost. So having an automated test would allow you to ensure that your code is working all the time.
So you pretty much listed every single type of testing.
I'm sure there are more.
Yeah, I
As far
have
as some
to
security
admit,
testing
I
and stuff.
set up quite a few build and release pipelines, but I suck at doing the tests. I mean, if you're talking about how long does it take to get up and running, setting up a DevOps pipeline just to build and test possible, the unit tests you have in your code, and then do the build and export solution or whatever you set it up like. That's super easy compared to setting up all the tests and making sure you cover all the test cases and so on. So I'm still, I've been saying it for quite a few years now. I'm going to go there one day.
Yeah, I think that's the next kind of level in maturity in terms of the DevOps. So I think, I think some project may not, get to that level depending on the time and the budget. So I would say try and do as much as you can. And if you get to the level where you have automated tests and UI tests, then that's kind of even better.
Yeah, I guess anything is better than nothing. It's like when you don't want to go to the gym, go there for 10 minutes. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and even start out small. Lots of times it's just getting in the habit of starting out and doing one thing, and then you can add another thing and another thing, grow by inches rather than trying to jump a mile. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you use Agile, for example, and you run in sprints every 2 weeks, and just dedicate some hours every sprint if you're really tight on time, and then do something in that sprint, and then by the time you're halfway through the project, you would have a good process in place.
So I think a final question here. I know, the communication from Microsoft and their platform team is very strong about, okay, go manage solutions, make sure you have your ALM process in check and so on. But we haven't really seen any tooling from them so far. So have they called you yet? You are the expert on this and given you a fat offer.
I can say that DevOps and ALM is very important, and I think Microsoft recognized the importance. So there is investment from Microsoft in tooling and in making the platform more DevOps compatible. So I would definitely expect to see some more capabilities coming, in the coming month or releases that would make life even easier for everyone to be able to adopt DevOps on this platform. Yeah.
So if you hadn't put it on GitHub, you might get that big offer. But now it's open source; they can just rip it.
It is on GitHub, and it's got lots of feedback from the community. I think, as you mentioned earlier, there is like 30-40 tasks in there now, and each one of them is based on a requirement from somebody in the community or from myself. So it's quite comprehensive. I think it will be interesting to see how Microsoft think the ALM should be kind of implemented going forward, and what's the overlap and what's the best practices and recommendations that we would recommend going forward. But I think it would definitely be easier to get up and running, and would definitely have more options. So yeah, I think very kind of exciting times.
Yeah. And you have been working closely with the APIs around, solution management and everything that your build pipelines do. Do you see, is there a big void? There is something missing that would sort of complete the story from what you can do with a platform, not necessarily from what build tools exist, but is there a part that's really messy to work with today that could be improved?
I think many people use the solution packager, and I know many projects face challenges at some point in using it because the way it generates the XML. So sometimes, you basically extract your solution and it kind of moves things around. So it's difficult to tell whether something has actually changed.
Yeah, so you get the noisy diffs that they're calling it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's something that will be fixed at some point. So that's one of the things. I think the online management APIs, I think there are a few APIs missing, like the restore and the copy. So I would expect these to come at some point as well. There is the data management side of things. I know there is a few things that are coming shortly to kind of help with that, but I think...
when you want to push like configuration data.
Yeah, exactly,
stuff. Customization, that's just configuration and data to configure it. Yeah, that's been a struggle forever.
Yeah, exactly. So there are some tools. I think I'm talking about the configuration migration tool. So I think it's very easy to use. It does lots of things. It has a few things missing at the moment, like it doesn't allow you to automatically export the data using the APIs. It doesn't allow you to filter records.
Well, that's when you use some old tool from InnoFactor instead that can do all those things.
Exactly. So
when you get your shovel out,
yeah, you're right. I mean, if you look in the marketplace, there is other tools like, your tool. There is some other tools that I've seen coming up recently as well. So the good thing is when you can mix and match to kind of put something together that, works for you, I guess. Yeah.
Well, the most important question, and this may be the last one here, is early bound or late bound?
I tend to prefer to use early bound where I can, unless it's something that really requires you to be very dynamic in the way you're handling the entities, and something that is very generic, then I would use late bound. I think obviously there is a marginal performance difference, but I don't think, in this current day and age that would make a huge significant difference to what you're doing. So my vote would be for early bound, where you can.
Yes. I'm adding a tick mark to my box.
He had a good argument there, and I think that was reasonably diplomatic, so I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yep. Well, Wael, thank you for your time today. I appreciate all that you've done in the community and all the tools that you've created to help all of our lives be less manual and more automatic. If people want to get hold of you and contact you, what's the best way to do that?
The best way is to reach me on, there's a number of channels. If your query is specific to the tools, then, by all means, there is a number of GitHub projects. So just go there and create an issue, whether it's an issue or a question. So that's the kind of easiest way. And sometimes you get, other people answering these questions as well. Obviously, there is, you can also reach me on LinkedIn or Twitter as well.
And what are those addresses? What's your Twitter handle?
It's Wael Hamze.
Just your name, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so complicated sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, I should think of something much easier, like XRM CI.
Yeah, I just put my name too, or just my initials, I guess. So try to make it shorter. But all right. Jonas, anything else we need to add?
No, I don't think so. It's just the how to reach us, but you usually do that introduction and I say the address, so go ahead.
All right. So if people want to reach us with new ideas or questions or comments, how can they do that?
Well, they can reach us on Twitter in the handle XrmToolCast or over email at cast@xrmtoolbox.com.
And for the record, how many emails have we gotten?
Oh, I couldn't count. Well, at least 2, I guess.
Yeah. So
I think Twitter is more popular.
Yeah. So if you're worried about over-bombing us with too much information, don't. Feel free to reach out. So, but anyway, thanks for listening. Hopefully this was something that was beneficial for you, and we'll post some links to some of the sites and things that were mentioned in the podcast. So
Thank you for your time, and everyone have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
This has been the XrmToolCast with Jonas Rapp and Daryl Labar. If you have any questions for Jonas or I, or suggestions for future episodes, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com or tweet to XrmToolCast.